Erik Erlendsson, lightinginsider.com. Yeah, you, buddy's got the Green Day shirt on. He's, he walked this empty street on the boulevard of. Well, I got a point last night. I was going to say empty games, but we've been talking so much Rays in the first hour. It's so tough. I got to change the. I got to get into hockey mode, man. I've just been so fired up about this whole Rays situation. I said this before, and I want to get your opinion on this. I feel like for baseball, you have the dog days of summer. I feel like the Lightning are in the dog days of spring right now, where they have they played well, 4 Nations break, trade deadline, emotion, and then they're coming down in the roller coaster a little bit. Cooch is out. It just feels like they kind of have to tread water until they find their game, until they get closer to the postseason. Do you agree with that?
Wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And in fact, the late great Martin Fennelly used to call them the sled dog days of hockey season, right? So, and this team, I mean, you look at the history under Jon Cooper, they tend to do this, right? They tend to have these really good long spurts followed by emotional letdown or whatever you want to call it. And I've been saying this the last few days, that if you look at how they handle the end of the season in these situations after they put together a good stretch, there's only been 2 times that I can remember since 2014 when Coop was first behind the bench that they pushed hard to the end of the season because they were chasing something other than a playoff spot. One was 2014 when they wanted to get home ice advantage, and that was Coop's first year in this format. They wanted home ice. They felt they needed home ice against Montreal. They got swept. In 2019, they were chasing history, league history, with the 62 wins, and they got it, and they pushed for it, and they got swept in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's conscious or unconscious or whatever the situations might be, we tend to see this from this team. And this will once again be my yearly plea to Lightning fans, especially those who like to show up in my mentions on Twitter. And I love you. Do not equate what you see from a game on March 14th and say that's how they're going to play in the playoffs. It just doesn't work that way. It's a different animal. The NHL postseason is so much more different than the regular season. It is the most different between regular season and postseason of any sport that you can find. So does it suck that they're not playing at the level we saw them play in February? For sure, right? And I understand why there's concern.
But it ain't as bad as January's.
Well, it's not, and it doesn't mean that. Well, look at the way they're playing right now. That's it. They're done in the first round again. Don't do that. Don't equate one to the other. There's no correlation whatsoever. I say it again every year. If that was the case, if momentum carried you into the playoffs, good or bad, the Ottawa Senators would have run away with the 2014 Stanley Cup because they won, 20 of their last 22 games.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what they did? They lost their first 3 games of the playoffs. It just doesn't matter. So don't get overly concerned about what you see right now, thinking it's going to matter in April.
One thing that we got to point out is Nikita Kucherov not being in there. I mean, we were talking about the Victor Hedman thing, him being out, but he comes right back. Any concern with Nikita Kucherov being out, short-term, long-term, maybe not even just physically, but mentally, because it seems like there's just a level of frustration with Kuch right now.
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
And like he says, I mean, they said that, he was out because he was sick. Right now, we did see him leave practice on Monday. I don't know if there's anything to it. Coop after the game against Carolina certainly didn't indicate that Kucherov was sick, but that's kind of where we're at with that. But I mean, Nikita Kucherov is such a special athlete. Like, he expects everything to go his way every single time.
All the time.
That's just how good he is.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how good he is. So yeah, when it doesn't go his way, he does tend to get a little frustrated. This is nothing new. That we've seen this from him before. The scene against the Sabres with him being benched for the final 7 minutes of the second period with his gloves up on the side of the boards and his arms crossed. It kind of tells you where he's at a little bit mentally. So, but I wouldn't get too concerned. There's a reason why Nikita Kucherov is as good as he is, because he works at it. He works at it very hard. He expects a lot of himself. And he's, as a lot of athletes are, he's an arrogant athlete because he thinks everything is going to go his way. And it doesn't. There's always other players on the ice, but he wants to win. And the work ethic that he puts in to be the best that he can be tells you how much he wants to win.
How about that whole thing with, Coop and Cooch? And I feel like that's kind of part of his genius for Jon Cooper of like knowing, because he said, just the entire thing, right? He said that they needed a little bit of a reset, that line. He sat Cooch in the past. He did get hit with the puck, but I think he just took that as a moment. It's almost like when I mentioned this yesterday, it's almost like when your kid's crying. Like he's upset, but he's crying about something else. You're just like, just go sit in the corner. And 10 minutes later, when you cried all out, then come out here and you can join the party with everybody else. I felt like it was that situation with Cooch. And then the way that Coop handles it in the press conference, he's like, just don't read too much into it. And then it ends. It stops right there. Like it doesn't fester. It doesn't boil. He always has his guys' backs. But I feel like and I had this conversation with Brian Engblom a couple months ago, his X's and O's game has certainly gotten better, obviously, since he's been in the league. But that lawyer mentality, that dealing with the personals, the way that he interacts, that man management that we hear in soccer a lot, I feel like that's where Coop's bread and butter is. And he can handle a guy like Nikita Kucherov and it not turn into a thing that turned into weeks, months, and, maybe leads to like a trade request down the road. It's just, he nips it in the bud. It's a small time thing. And then you move on.
It's his greatest strength.
Yeah.
It's how he deals with players on a personal level. Right. Like, and that's a modern day coach and a modern day athlete. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is. I mean, you hear athletes all the time. They want more information. They want to be informed. They want to know. Don't just tell me, go out and do it. Tell me why. Why? It's the why generation. And Jon Cooper excels at that. The way that he talks to players, because he has a way. We think of the old school styles, right? Like the Mike Keenans, in a lot of ways, the John Tortorella's, even though he's softened up for John Tortorella these days. You can, for lack of a better term, you don't have to tear them down to build them back up. Right. He has a way of getting his message across without putting you down and making you feel bad about it. Right. Whether it's cracking a joke while you're talking about it or whatever else it is, he just knows how to manage people. And, you talk to guys through the years that have played for him and, even going back to his days in the American Hockey League and how he would kind of get that message across without making the player feel bad about it. And he never throws a player under the bus.
Never. Like
10 plus years here, you very rarely hear him say anything negative about a player publicly, right? Even as we in the media try to lead him down a path, he will never take that bait. He will always bring it back to something else that's more team related. And that's just a strength of his. And that's how he's able to, relate to players so well because he communicates with them so well.
Yeah. He'll give grief to the media before he gives grief to a player. That's the reality of the situation. What do you make of the play of the new guys? What have you seen from Gordon Bjorkstrand now that we've had a couple of games with them back with the Bolts?
Well, I think Bjorkstrand is still trying to find his way a little bit, which is not unusual. It's only been, three or four games since the trade. You think back to 2022 and Nick Paul and Brandon Hagel, the difference when those guys came, right? Nick Paul looked like he'd been here for a decade, fit right in and was confident and everything else. And, hey, it took Hagel a little bit longer. So some players take longer than others. I think Bjorkstrand is still trying to figure all of that out. I think that's a big reason why Coop has left him on a line with Yanni Gourde, throughout most of, the first few games here because of the familiarity with each other as they try and get familiar with the system. It's a different case for Yanni. He's, a lot of familiar things for him, not everything, but a lot of familiar things for Yanni. I think you're seeing the versatility of Yanni Gourde. He's not the same player as we talked about before the trade deadline. He's not the same guy, so don't think you're getting back 2021 Yanni Gourde. But he's still versatile. He was great in the face-off circle last night. You've seen him put Gourde up with Point and Gensel a couple of times here because he can still provide a spark of energy. That's what he can do. Put him on the wing, put him at center, whatever it is, you can do it. Bjorkstrand, again, I think still trying to figure out the system a little bit. I think he's eventually going to end up on a line with Sorella and Hagel. I think that's the idea they had in mind when they brought him in. We've seen it in practice. We've seen that line together in practice, but we haven't seen it really in a game yet. The power play, I think they're trying to integrate him into the power play to be that right-handed threat on the left side for Nikita Kucherov to kind of open up the power play a little bit. So it's a work in progress. Usually you kind of look at things around the 10-game mark and see where things are at that point, see where they're figuring it out.
The old 10-game mark, right, buddy? I remember you and I did the math, I think, years ago. We were like, you guys think Blake, because everybody's like, I can't believe this deal. And I think it was around the Hagel Sorelli or Hagel and Nick Paul thing. So I think you and I looked at it and it was like, you guys know after 10 games, like Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow did like nothing for this team at all. So you got to give it 10 games.
Yeah, you can't have an instant reaction. We want it. Yeah. Sometimes you get it, like I said, Nick Paul was coming here. All of a sudden he was doing between the legs, shorthanded goals and, spinorama passes to Ross Colton. I mean, he felt like his game opened up big time and he fit right in. Other guys just take a little bit longer. So, they're getting there. Bjorkstrand is not a rental. He's here for another year. Right. So this is not just we're only getting him for 15 games type of situation. So he'll figure it out. He's too good and too smart of a player.
What do we think of defensively? No Radish last night. Anything to read into that? And do you think well, I want to get to the forwards after this, but defensively, how do you think this is going to shake down? Are we going to is it going to be these 7 guys, sometimes go 12-6, sometimes go 11-7? Does Crozier have any way to get into this lineup if not for an injury? Like, is this kind of the decor? Is it set the way it's going to look like, you think, come postseason time?
Well, Crozier's the wild card.
Yep.
He's been such a good partner for Emil Lilleberg, even going back to the time towards the end of the season last year when they were together. I still don't wonder if Crozier is more of the guy once we get to the playoffs because the cap situation and everything else. I don't wonder if we don't get to that point because that's the one thing regarding the trade deadline that I thought Julian might still address was some depth on the right-hand side for that because, let's face it, you get into a playoff series, how comfortable are you with that bottom pair? If they get stuck out on an icing against Austin Matthews' line or, Sasha Barkov or somebody like that, what's your comfort level that they can get the job done and keep them off the scoreboard? So, but they are what they are. You have what you have. Crozier does kind of be a little bit of an X factor here, but it is not the most comfortable situation from my viewpoint. In no matter who it is, no matter who's on that right side, right? Radish has been kind of a power play guy here of late, and he didn't play last night, and McDonough's been getting some second power play time. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle all this once we get to April, because let's be clear on something. They're not in danger of missing the playoffs.
No. What about offensively, Eric? I look at this team and, obviously when we get Cooch back and I think the team starts rolling, will be in a good chance, kind of a good spot here. But first off, I find it a little weird that we get into the playoffs and Connor Geeky's not at some point involved in the mix. And then, what happens with Isaac Howard? What happens with Dylan Duke? What happens with maybe a Jack Finley? Like, I just, as much as it was great to see some, contributions from the bottom 6, after watching that game last night, I just keep thinking to myself, goals are good, but give me some juice. Who's going to give me that juice on that third line? And I just wonder, is it the guys that are on the roster right now, or do they have to dip into their depth, whether it's, again, Isaac Howard or somebody that's playing the AHL? How do you see that whole thing shaking out?
I think you have to be of the mindset that what you have now is what you're going to go with. Right.
Are you comfortable with that? I don't know if I'm comfortable with having, and I know they chip in here and there, but I don't know if Chafee Gonsalves, like, if that's good enough for this team to win the Stanley Cup. It's not about competing. It's not like this team wants to win, right? Your top 6, I think you can go with anybody. Top defensive guys you can go with. Your goalie, obviously, but then when you get to that third line, and I'm not even comparing them to the last time, they won the cup with that third line. But it's just, are they going to be consistent enough to give the team juice, right? Because even if they don't score a ton of goals, they got to at least be able to have some shifts where you're hemming the puck in deep. You're able to contribute in that way where it's not like, all right, you're flipping the puck out and now you're changing on the fly and everything's just kind of going to hell in a handbasket and you're never in control of the game. Are they difficult enough to play against for this team to make a postseason run?
I think Zemgus Girgenson's the poster boy for everything you just said.
Yeah.
He's not scoring. He scored last night, but he's not contributing offensively. And people are like, you got to get rid of him. He's terrible. Why is he in the lineup? He's not scoring. But if you look at the way he plays, there's juice there. He forechecks. He defends hard. He kills penalties. Like he does a lot of the very minor type of roles that help teams win games. Glendening is sort of the same way. Chafee does bring some size. Because at the end of the day, if you look at what you have right now and you think that Connor Geekie is a savior, you can't think of it that way. Right. Isaac Howard coming in, he's coming straight out of college. That's assuming if he does. We're assuming that's going to be the case once Michigan State's season comes to a close. But that's why I think you have to go with what you have now, and that's why Bjorkstrand is going to be so important to the success of this team because they brought him in as a secondary scorer, to kind of support some of the offense and the versatility of Yanni Gourde. You can play up and down the lineup, right? It doesn't matter what role he plays. Now, it would be Gonsalves's first postseason, assuming he stays in the lineup, but he's contributing offensively, right? Like you got on the scoreboard last night. Cam Atkinson, I don't know if he factors into it too much. Great guy to have in the room. He's so positive. And especially with the season that he's had and everything else, he's such a positive influence from a locker room standpoint. But I think the forward group is what you have. Could you inject a Geekie? Yeah, maybe. Could you inject a Dylan Duke? Yeah, maybe. And Jack Finley, 6'6", Logan Brown, right? They signed Logan Brown to that NHL contract. He's 6'6" and brings some size, former first-round draft pick. So they have options down there. But are you going to see those guys at the end of the regular season? Remember, you're limited on call-ups. You can't just call out guys on a whim and insert them into the lineup and see how they look. You have to, you are limited by the CBA and what you can do in calling guys up from the minors. And you have the cap to worry about. And then, depending on how Syracuse's season goes, they're vying for a playoff spot, right? You don't want to raid them and take away that opportunity either, right? So there's a lot of balance going on there. And that's why I think, I think the group that you have forward-wise is what you're going to go to battle with.
What do you want to see over these next couple of games to try to, have this team right the ship and get back to at least winning on a consistent clip?
Well, the first thing I think you want to see is urgency, some emotional level into the game. Certainly wasn't there last weekend against Boston. Was there for the first period against Carolina. Then it kind of fell apart. Really wasn't there much last night against Philly. Again, a team that could be hard to get up for, quote unquote, at this time of the year. And then they certainly didn't have the right frame of mind throughout that game. So I just want to see that level come up. I want to see the turnovers cut down on. That was a big factor Saturday against the Bruins. I thought that was a huge factor. Again, last night, the puck management, when they were winning games, during the winning streak especially, that's one of the big things that they talked about was how they managed the puck and not turning pucks over. And, Braden Point, the last couple of games, you've seen him try and stick handle through 2 or 3 guys and lose the puck. All of a sudden it's going the other way and you're kind of caught in transition. And, and that put their rush defense under pressure last night. They didn't handle it very well. So, we can talk about defensive systems, defensive structure, defensive play. I think it all starts with puck management because you start cutting the ice in half for the other team, let them transition quickly on you. That's where this team gets themselves into danger.
No doubt about it. LightningInsider.com. Our guy, Erik Erlendsson. That's a K, not a C, 2 S's after the D. Erik_Erlendsson. Use that promo code JNZ, LightningInsider.com. Get $10 off, not just this year, but every recurring season. What do you got up on the site right now, my friends?
Well, I talked about a lot of the stuff that happened in last night's game. I did a story last week about, how the importance of chemistry in hockey and why it's important for the leaders on a team, in this case, Victor Hedman and Ryan McDonough in particular, to reach out to a guy like Oliver Bjorkstrand right away to kind of create help create some of that chemistry and put a player at ease before they come out of the locker room. So some good stuff. And there's included some good comments from Jeff Blashill. The Yanni Gord coming home, that story's up too. That's having some good play on the side as well. So yeah, a lot of good stuff and a lot more to come because this season is going to go on, I think, longer than people think.
Yes, especially right now where everything's all gloom and doom. Oh, this team sucks. They should have traded Cooch at the deadline. You crazy man.
Pray for my mentions, Jay.
Pray for Erik's mentions. Again, support local, support lightninginsider.com. It's a great thing to get, even as a gift for a friend or a family member for, whatever, birthdays, anniversaries, especially as we get closer and closer to the postseason. Cannot wait. Appreciate it, buddy. Talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks, man. Glad to see you're feeling better.
Thanks, pal.